Tēnā tātou te whānau, welcome back to Planting Seeds. Looking forward to the chat this evening. We probably might take you on a bit of a roller coaster, might have a lot of laughing, might have a lot of deep thought, but everything in between is going to be an exciting journey for us to go through this conversation. And before I introduce our next guest, I just want to do a big shout out to the first proper sponsor for Planting Seeds, and that's going out to Clothing, the bro Joey Webb, and what this brand is all about. They've been making waves here in New Zealand for some time now, and you've probably seen the hoodies, you've seen the t-shirts, and the quality of what it is that they're doing. So just want to do a big shout out to the bro Joey Webb and the team over at Clothing for being the first official sponsors for Planting Seeds. So massive shout out. You'll be able to check out the link there, and they're going to be looking after us, the podcast and the guests and the people who are tuning in with giveaways, with discounts and all of those kinds of things. So stay tuned to see where this relationship is going to go. Without further ado, just going to now welcome our guest, the brother Joey. Welcome, bro.
Rand, appreciate you having me, brother, and shout out to Webby as well on I still remember when Webby started, so it's so cool to see him supporting you and just doing everything he's doing. But I appreciate you having me, brother. Thank you so much.
Bro, it's been a long time coming. Just before I press record, there's been a few instances where this was always going to happen, but just off camera there, it was sort of as though those kinds of times we were meant to have it sort of were missed for some kind of reason, and it's almost we're now at this full circle moment where we can talk about a whole lot more. But I remember seeing your followers at 6 to 7k, and I just thought you're the most hilarious cunt in New Zealand, bro. Like just it was just that real dry humor, but it was just done incredibly well. And I remember just sitting in my car, how you just sit in the car after work or after the gym and you're just scrolling, bro. I would just go through your feed for hours, bro, and just crack up. So it's been cool, bro, to see the progression of your journey to where you are now. But outside of having a big cock, bro, like what brings you here?
Dang, not a whole lot, brother, to be honest. You can't have just given away all the sauce there. Like, there's still a bit of sauce in there, but it's not that kind of show. So, but it's so buzzy. I don't know if you remember, but bro, do you remember when you first reached out to me and I told you, I was like, bro, I'm literally listening to your podcast right now. Yeah, but I think I even may have sent you a screenshot. I remember I was listening to yours and Ice's, the one you did with Ice, and I think. Was Ice in... I'm trying to think what you guys were doing. Maybe it was Ice, or maybe it was Jordan. I think it was actually Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Jordan. And you guys were doing it in... that's right, in your...
food trailer.
Yeah, in your food trailer. Right, so that was... I remember feeling like that was crazy, because, it was so early on in my journey. And I was very familiar with you, obviously, and very familiar with George, and super familiar with this whole kind of brown influencer space that had really started to I feel like it really started to grow around that time and really started to become quite prominent. I just remember kind of coming up and seeing a lot of the you, George, obviously Ice and YKTI over in Aussie, I include Lance in there as well. Just all these real cool young brown creatives that were doing heaps of cool stuff. And they seemed to be real scucks too, which was pissing me off. Because here was me with 6K. I was living with my auntie and uncle. I was up to Apple, just making videos and shit. And there were just all these guys that were just pulling heaps of chicks at sweatshop and stuff, and I was spewing. But I remember very much wanting to be a part of what I saw was really starting to transpire. And so when you reached out to me, that was quite a moment for me where I was like, oh damn, okay, Rand's is seeing me, it must be connecting in some space that's close to one that I want to be in. So but it's always been quite surreal just ever even seeing you and talking to you, because you were very much somebody that I kind of held up to that pedestal that I wanted to be on. And so
and that's cool, bro. It feels cool to see things from your perspective. And I think it is cool, bro, just to see that there is people within this Pacific Polynesian community really starting to step into this creativity, and trying to bring value and stepping into their light. And it is, bro, it's one of those things where you're like, whoa, I really, it's not necessarily wanting to be a part of that, but there's something in me that has been drawn to what is happening at the moment. And like, honestly, bro, I remember having that feeling, like just looking at your stuff, it was incredibly entertaining, bro. And I feel I just appreciate our humor here in New Zealand, bro. Like I really feel it's so different to what is out there, because it's borderline, it's borderline, you shouldn't say it, but it's said anyway. And it's just taken in the humorous way. It's not taken as like, oh, bro, this fella's a dickhead. It's like, nah, you see the underlying humor within that,
Exactly. And like, I really grew up on, like, it's really funny. Like when it came to how my humor kind of developed, it was so I grew up overseas. I grew up in Asia till I was about 11, and then moved back to New Zealand. And how my humor kind of developed was I was actually quite tied to like British humor, which traditionally in New Zealand, mainly like Pākehā, like they align themselves with British humor quite heavily in New Zealand. And so I was very much like into that. But then when I came back to New Zealand, and then started to sort of, I guess, like get involved more in I guess, like more brown society, and like even my own cultures, like more Māori and my Fijian side, I started to get more, that was where, because British humor was sort of my first experience with humor, I was experiencing brown humor for the first time. And that was like roasting. And that was like, talking, like being at a funeral and making fun of the person that's dead. Or like, like somebody's granddad just died and they're already making fun of him. Like I was experiencing that for the first time. And I remember it was just so jarring to me. And it was so different to anything I've experienced. But I remember seeing the difference. And that difference still sits with me. And so I guess when it comes to today's age, where a lot of people are like, oh, like Kiwi humor's dry or Kiwi humor's this or that. For me, I was just like, yeah, but brown humor is the special thing that I've seen the difference in. And I know there isn't anywhere else that it's like that. I'm going to really engross myself in that. And not only that, like, because from day one, my sights have always been set to succeeding overseas. My thing has always been, I can take that to that level over there, when I eventually get to that point. So that's kind of been my experience with like how my humor's developed.
Yeah. And what is it like being that, wouldn't sort of call it like that token funny guy, but like, was that something that you fully stepped into, bro? Were you just happy to be that clown and that funny guy within your circle of mates, bro?
Bro, so it was the complete opposite. So
straight up,
honestly, bro. Like,
so you were inspired from those clowns that were the funny guys.
Straight up, bro. You can ask anybody that knew me, I reckon, before the age of like 18, and they'll tell you like Joe's super quiet, like just kind of does his own thing. Like I even because I go to therapy like regularly, and I was telling my therapist today like what I used to just go hang out in the computer room when I was in school. And like, I was always like really obsessed with like learning stuff, and I didn't really like really getting out there too much and doing things. Like on the weekend, I wasn't trying to go to parties and that. I was just trying to do my own thing. And so I was super quiet, but I loved observing, and I always picked up on things, and I always kind of knew what I thought of things, but I always kept that to myself. And so when it comes to the skills that have like brought me to where I am today, it was the observational, seeing what things are, seeing the funny angle on things. That was what I picked up. But when it came to like the actual being funny, I wasn't that for like a real long time. But yeah, bro, it's been quite an interesting progression again on seeing where it comes from. But I know for me, like my special power is in seeing the differences and being okay with like being open about them, because now I'm at the point, I guess, where I'll literally just talk about whatever. It doesn't, like, I'm not uncomfortable and I'm not too worried about the consequences, just because I'm very sure of like the perspective I come from. So
Wow. And has that been
Yeah.
something you've learned to navigate through, bro? Because obviously, people take things in so many different ways, and when you're sort of sharing it on a social media platform, but also just within in your spaces, like you're probably dealing with a lot of people who have certain views about how you're saying it and how you're sharing it. And how have you been able to sort of come to that point in yourself and being like, I know my intention of it,
Yeah.
and where, how did it take you a while to get to that point, bro?
I was pretty lucky that like I had already lived quite a fulfilled life before I even like really started putting myself out there like that on social media. So when it came to sort of having my opinion accepted, to be honest, like I was used to it not being accepted. Like, bro, all through high school, and it still kind of gives me like I still have like a Dion nightmare flashback. All through high school, anytime I try to say something, I got the dry. I got the this
Oh,
guy
yeah.
thinks he's funny. Like I got those ones, right? Like over and over again. So I was so used to rejection, I guess, socially, and at least in a way of like me putting forward my own ideas. Like objectively, you could consider me popular because I hung out with like popular people, but when it came to me actually being able to be myself, that was rejected all the time, and not
Wow.
even from my mates, but like my family. And so by the time I got to social media, I had already really gotten myself to a point where like I'm actually fine with who I am, and myself. And so when it comes to on social media, however I put myself forward, if it's not accepted, I just don't really give a fuck. So it's I've been very lucky that I was able
Mm.
to look there. And so when people ask me like for advice in that, I just tell them like, just get off the internet, just go live your life, because you see so many people like when people come after them on the internet, like they get really thrown off, which is understandable. But it's just as easy as just turning your phone off and actually going outside, and that kind of brings you back to like the real world. And I
Mm.
also just learned real early that everyone on social media is all shit, to be honest. No one actually says what they actually believe. Like it's all just one thing of like, it reminds me of high school. You're all just trying to be what you think is like the
Is
cool thing.
accepted.
And
Yeah.
that's social media. Like back in the day, it used to be, all the boys would go to the gym and play rugby. And that was the thing we do to be accepted. These days it's like you have to have a certain opinion. But
Mm.
I see it in the same frame. They're just trying to get a six pack. They're just trying to play first 15. Like
Mm.
that's all I see. Me, I'm trying to go learn, piano or some shit. I'm trying to do my own thing. I'm trying to hang in the library. I'm trying to, meet chicks out the back shed and talk about geometry. Like, talk about obtuse angles and, isometrics. I don't know what that is. But yeah.
I think that's just such a valid point, bro, because it's such a hard space to navigate, for people who are looking at social media or the internet as the thing. It's only
Yeah.
like a small percentage of your life. And you look at people's feeds and, look at mine or yours, we're not even showing like, a decent percentage of our actual lives, and people are
Exactly.
getting so caught up on what they're seeing when really it's only such a small fraction of what people are choosing to show. So,
Exactly.
putting everything in that kind of way is like, bro, when you get to a point where you understand like people are just people. And I think you've
Yeah.
probably had the experience as well where, you're sitting at certain tables and you actually start to humanize these people you saw online.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you bring
For
these
sure.
sort of different levels of connection to sci-fi. You see these people online with followers and you're like, man, they're awesome. They're creative. And you put them like perhaps on a pedestal, and then you meet them and you're like, holy shit, there's not much difference between the way that this person thinks, the way that I think, the way that I feel, the way that they feel. And there's a
Right.
similarity within that. So for me, it's being able to connect with people of a certain caliber and being in other spaces. I've really been able to see just holy hell, at the end of the day, we're all human. We all got
Yeah.
shit that we're dealing with. We all got things that we're
Exactly.
grateful for, and we all got gifts that we want to share. So for me, it's we all have something in common. At the end of the day, it's just know that social media, it's a tool, right? It can
Yeah.
get us
Yeah.
into certain spaces. It can help us with certain things, but at the end of the day, it's not all or everything.
Yeah. It's by like a real funny way that I combat. Like I shouldn't even say combat, because I actually do it like really intentionally. Like sometimes people will send me stuff like, "Yeah, you're dry as fuck," or like, "Oh, if you like, you're an idiot," stuff like that. And I'll voice message back, and I'll be like, "Yo, what are you insecure about?" I tell them, like, what do you hate about yourself? And then like they'll send like a massive message, and it's one of those things where like, behind like every social media has this thing, and I watched this documentary called The Social Dilemma where they did a lot of research around like cancel culture and stuff like that. And the reason it's such a prolific thing is because you don't see each other's faces, we don't have that natural like human programming where we can respond to the emotions that they're probably feeling. Where what we're doing is we're taking what we're seeing of them and allowing that to be the representation of them as a person. And then because that isn't tied to like their face, it's just words, we can actually take that as far reaching as we can, because it's a difference where if you see someone say something in person and if you see it written. If you see them say it in person, you can sort of deduct all these things where you're like, okay, I can kind of see where they're coming from. I can also see, even little things, like I can see they're sweating, like, okay, so they're nervous saying this, or I can see that they're a little bit sad. I can see it in their facial features. Whereas when you put that as words on the internet, like people completely subtract any sort of humanizing traits from whatever it is they're saying. So it's very easy to just attack. And so what I guess I always try to approach social media in a way of was like trying to humanize it. And like I even try to do it and like, I don't try like post it like in like a particular tone, and like I swear all the time, and like I don't try to present myself in like a different way to like what I am in the moment. Like if I look like shit, like I'll just put it up. It's been a journey of me trying to figure out how I can like humanize the experience for myself, and then in turn, people I guess start to humanize me on social media. So you actually are already like starting to protect yourself from that very thing that you see have quite a detrimental effect for other people. So
100.
That's just kind of the approach, I guess.
I think it's an important approach. And I remember the big dog Ice talking about probably one of the best compliments that you can get is meeting someone in real life and they saying, "Oh, bro, you're pretty much the same, as what I see online." Like that is quite, there is a level of humility when you get that kind of response. Because if you're authentic and you don't want to sort of like have that kind of persona or facade, online where you're available to be seen by everyone at any location, and then now you see someone in real life and you're completely different. It's quite a that'll be hard to sort of like take in, because you can feel the contradiction, or you can feel some sort of level of unease at a deeper level, even if you sort of brush it off. So I think it's cool, bro, how you sort of say that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest intentions that I have for this podcast is being able to bring people's story in a different way, where people can actually see, holy hell, these are just regular people who have done something with their lives and have got them to a certain space. But at the end of the day, it's how did they get there? It's by recognizing like who they are and going through all of those valleys that they've gone through. And what I know for sure about you, bro, is you're being very open about some of the things that you've gone through, which has helped with your perspective. And, recently you've been talking about just a couple of years ago, you were sleeping in your car. And talk about that whole experience, bro, and what going back there and looking at, holy shit, like that was your life for a minute there,
Yeah, it's funny, bro. Like I only actually talked about it in detail for the first time, like quite recently, and talked about like actually like what I would do. So basically, like what happened was, so in 2018, I was homeless for about 3 months. I think it ended up being about 3 months, and what had happened was I'd been living with a bunch of my mates, and I'd been paying like $80 a week. So, it was cheap as, had a mean setup. I lived in the garage of our flat. There was like 8 of us in there in this 5-bedroom flat in Epsom, 8 of my best mates, and it was me. And what happened was the boys actually went overseas. And at this point, I had already started comedy. And comedy, when I first started it was quite like contentious amongst my family. Like they won't mind me saying, they were very against it. And so it was really, really difficult because my parents had sacrificed a lot through their lives for my brothers and I. Like, they sent me and my brothers to private school, and they're not rich by any means. So they sacrificed a lot to pay for us to go. And so, they've done all these things, and then here's their son coming to them being like, Mum and Dad, I'm going to go do comedy. And and in order to pursue comedy, I was also like having to. It was difficult. You can't really work a 9 to 5 if you're really trying to do comedy, because in order to get the stage time, you need to travel around. So I was traveling to like Christchurch and Palmerston North, like all kinds of places to do stand up. And obviously, you need money, but you need the time. And so I was working casual labouring jobs, which were mean because you had the flexibility of, if you only had time to work like 5 hours a week, you could, but you could work like 60. And so I was casual labouring, and then eventually I started cleaning caravans. And what had happened was I was making like less than minimum wage in what I was doing, but it was enough for me to live in the flat that I was living in and still do comedy. So I was sweet. And then the boys moved out, and we moved out of our flat, and then I couldn't find anywhere that I could afford. And so I slept on like the couch of a few of my close mates. Slept on their couch for about a month. And then I like very much overstayed my welcome. And like the boys, to give them credit, they never kicked me out by any means, but I could tell, like, they're kind of like, bro, can you go fucking can you go fucking find somewhere to live? Like, sick you sleeping on that couch. So because I was sort of in a position where, like, my family were already very against me making the decisions that I've made, but I also like really backed myself into a corner where I couldn't find anywhere to live that I could afford. And I also couldn't like land a permanent job, because this was the other thing, was because I hadn't finished university, I was falling into this like difficult space where I was trying to apply for like, cleaning graffiti jobs, like these minimum wage jobs, because I tried to apply for like admin jobs that I thought I was more than capable for. But because I didn't have university, like because I hadn't graduated from university or anything, they didn't see me as fit enough. So I had to go apply for like labouring jobs. But then I'd go to interviews for labouring jobs, and they'd meet me and kind of hear me speak and stuff. And they'd be like, we can't hire you because we know you're going to leave as soon as you find something good. So I was in like this middle ground, bro, where I was kind of like, fuck, like I can't get like a job that will allow me the money to move into a flat. But then I also like can't even find a flat. And so, I just started living in my car, and I lived in my car for about 3 months. And it was real difficult because really the only solution was like, I just tell my parents that I'm struggling. But because it was already quite contentious, and to be honest, there was like I was very like ashamed of myself that I had gotten myself in that situation. So I just didn't tell anyone. Like even my mates, bro, like when they found out after all these years, one of my mates found out because I told Women's Day, and like Women's Day wrote it, and he's like, what the fuck? Like, you were homeless? And I was like, yeah. I was just prototypical, I'm going to say New Zealand man, not just brown man. New Zealand man. One word that we get called often is that we have too much pride, but I don't think that's the word. Like, I think the word has always been, to me, it's always been shame. And I think us as men, we are often made to feel shame when we're not in a position that we feel like we should be in, which are purely based off of expectations that we've put on ourselves. Yeah. And society has definitely played a lot in making us feel that way, and also our upbringings and stuff like that. But very much I was suffering like the plight of a lot of young men, where I'm like, okay, I'm not making a lot of money. I don't even have a partner that like, so I don't even seem worthy of like a partner. I also don't have like a career. I'm in this position where I don't really think I deserve help, because I have all this like shame around where I'm sort of at. I have to figure this out on my own. Wow. So that was kind of everything that led into me being homeless for the amount of time that I was. And yeah, pretty much I would just, all my day to day was if I wasn't working. So I would always like sleep at Mission Bay. So I have quite like a sentimental, there's a lot of sentimental value to Mission Bay for me. So I'd park up at Mission Bay, and every morning I'd wake up, I'd go to City Fitness because I paid for the minimum, I think the minimum membership at the time was like $6 a week. So it's like nothing,
Yeah.
And so I'd go shower at City Fitness Newmarket showers, and then I had my laptop and I'd just go work out of Epsom Library, and it's Epsom Library along Manukau Road. And that was just my day-to-day. And all my work would just be looking for jobs, a mix of looking for jobs, looking for television opportunities, writing stand-up, writing scripts, like all kinds of things. And like the biggest thing was like planning for what the sort of broader like plan for my future was going to be. And that was all I'd do all day, bro. It was just, I'd wake up at MB, go shower City Fit, head to the library, and I'd I'd go down to the, there was like these $3 like scrolls that they had at Countdown. And I'd go, they were massive. Back then they were massive. So I just get a $3 scroll and just like eat half for breakfast, half for lunch, and then just grab another one for dinner. And so, I just would sort of get by on like just the bare minimum. But I honestly look back at that time and it's only fond memories, bro. Honestly, like it's for me, I just am like, fuck, like I really just kind of made it happen from there. Like it's crazy to look back at. And so when I talk about it now and describe exactly what I was going through, like to compare it to where I'm at now, it's so surreal.
Yeah, that's so right, bro, in terms of how we language it with pride, like we're proud men, but it's just a way to hide behind the shame again. Exactly. We say pride, but really on a deeper level, if we're to be completely honest, whenever we fail, it's because we're holding shame. Yeah, bro. And we don't have that. We haven't been taught or haven't had the privilege to really step into that vulnerability of admitting honestly, like, exactly. It's not about pride. It's just me being honest about, man, I actually feel shame about what is going on. Yeah. And for you to sort of look at that now with this perspective, and may even being back then, what were you feeling when you had that realization, bro? Were you aware that you're in so much shame, and were you honest with yourself in that moment, or was there enough belief in you that you knew that something was going to happen?
Bro, so it was honestly both. Like I can honestly say it was both. So like for me, the shame would only come when I like saw people that I knew, or interacted with people that I knew. But how I cut that off is I just didn't talk to anyone. So I didn't talk to my mates, didn't talk to my family. So that shame was very deep, only when it came out in those situations. And so what I did was just shut myself off, because when it was just me, I was like, even back then, bro, I was in this mindset where I was like, this is so going to work. And like, I couldn't think of any more of a sure thing than me figuring this out. Like legit, I think I still remember quite a difficult conversation I had with my mum and dad, and it was actually after like I moved in with my auntie and uncle, so I wasn't homeless anymore. But I had a conversation with my mum and dad, and things still weren't really like going my way. Like I wasn't really like, I didn't have a whole lot to show. I was working my ass off, but I didn't have a lot to show for it. And they were just like, how long are you going to do this? Like, how long are you going to put not only yourself through this, but put us through this? And I was just like, I don't know how I know, but I just know it's so close. Like it's so close. I remember this conversation. So I was homeless till about the middle of July 2018, and then this conversation we had was start of 2019. And I told them, I was like, it's just so close. Like I don't know how I know. I can't tell you, but it is. I'm nearly there. And then a year and a half later, sold out Sky City Theatre.
Oh, there's something about belief, bro. There's just something incredible about self-belief, cuz when you can't explain it, but you know it to be true, bro. Like, and like, bro, I'm getting fucking like shivers, cuz like when I speak about that, because only like there's something in you that is like brewing, even though your external circumstances, like your life, when you look out through these eyes, it's not in alignment to what you're feeling inside. But self-belief, I believe, is that part is so much more real than anything else you're seeing.
Oh, bro. And it sounds so cliche, but you literally like cannot describe the feeling that you have on like why you know it. And I remember sitting with my mum and dad and being like, I could not tell you why I know it's about to happen, but it's about to happen. And it was funny, like when I found out that our show got a show that my company's co-producing with a company called Culture Factory. The show's called Bouncers, and they got picked up by Sky New Zealand and Comedy Central, and who's like, you know, the biggest comedy entertainment brand in the world, which is crazy. I remember when I told my parents, my dad isn't like a very reflective dude, and he's not like very like we don't have a lot of like massive combos or anything. He's a pretty quiet dude. Even he was like, damn, I remember that combo where you told him. And it was, and because I think we found out that news, it was like January 2021. So it was like literally 2 years after we had that combo. And if you look at it in hindsight, like that's not much time. And so I went from like having absolutely nothing to show to having something that completely validated all that struggle in the space of 2 years. And so like the thing I always say to people is like, you're 2 years away from what you dream of. Like you're 2 years away. Like just start it, because it sounds like it's a lot, but when you look back, you're like, damn, 2 years is nothing.
But it's almost like the things that we're most afraid of, you know, and I feel, you know, when you say it, bro, you went through the thing that everyone is most fearful of, and that's failing, people not believing in you, being isolated and being on your own. But you being able to go through that experience and holding on to this feeling of like, nah, I still believe in this, like this is going to happen. Like you said, that 2 years just happened like that, and everything just started to align itself to how you're feeling and how you're picturing it. And when you start to feel that, bro, like what was your breakthrough moment? Was it social media? Was there other things happening? Like what was your breakthrough moment that again gave you the confirmation, like fuck yeah, it's almost close?
I was lucky, bro. Like I will say, like practically to anybody listening, like it's just going to be the people around you that really do it for you. Like I was really lucky that. So when I first started stand up, my like mentor in stand up was this old fella named Brendan Lovegrove, and he's like a legend in the New Zealand stand up industry. But he's like, you know, like he's. I wouldn't blame anybody for not knowing who he is. Like, and he's a dude that he actively, if you ask any like well-known comedian, you can ask Flight of the Conchords, bro, like who the best comedian in New Zealand is, they'll say this guy Brendan Lovegrove. And so literally when I first started stand-up, I had this book where I would and people would have seen it on my story, but it had all my goals in it, and it had this master plan of like my whole life in it. And it's buzzy, like it's just been a process. These last few years, it's just been a process of ticking off like all the things I'd planned when I first made this book in 2017. And anyways, on one part of the book had all that, and then the other part of the book had all these quotes of like what people would say to me, like positive things they'd say to me. And I had a whole page of just things that Brendan Lovegrove would say to me, and there were things that like. There's a thing when like your parents are telling you, or you know, if for a lot of people it's like, you know, our mums, like, you know, they'll say like, you know, you can be an All Black even though you're like you play 4-15 and your first 15's in Div 3 and you're playing 4-15, like, and you know, you still have your mum saying you'll be an All Black. It's like, come on, mum, stop lying to him. He's going to be an accountant. And so like for me, it was the first time in my life that somebody had actually talked to me in the way that like, you know, you needed it. But it was this guy who I really respected, and he'd say shit to me like, you're gonna be huge, you're gonna be the most famous comedian and that's ever come out of New Zealand. I could see you being on TV in America. Yeah, it'd be like smoking ciggies. He'd be like, you'll be in New Zealand in like 6 months' time. And like just saying stuff like that. And nobody had ever talked to me like that. And so for Lovegrove, for someone like him, you know, he wasn't like this big power player who had any, you know, he just hosted like local open mics, and like we just we just kind of would just hang out after open mics till like 4 a.m. But he was just somebody that I really lent on. And that I really respected that really respected me, and that was all I needed through those years. It was he wasn't somebody that like validated me in like a career way. He didn't like open up a bunch of doors for me. He just saw what I was trying to do and validated that. And for a young man, I realized the power of having a role model that does that for you. So I was so lucky to have that, bro, because that got me through it all. Like I would just think about it every day, and that was really what I learned from.
That's so mean, bro, when you have someone that aligns with the things that you tell yourself to make yourself get up out of bed, and you're telling yourself these affirmations, but then now you've got someone who you look up to who is sort of reaffirming those kinds of messages, and it's quite a nice feeling to have that sort of confirmation, bro. And I suppose from there, like I start to think about, bro, you've got some timeless videos, that could just pop up, like in 20 years from now and just crack me up, like the MILF one, iconic, right? Living rent free in our minds, bro. Like you're teaching that rugby one where you're doing the stepping, like that's timeless. Like you've got these, the hairline, like all of those kinds of things are just the Joey D, and when you think back when you're creating this content and you're seeing people share it and you're seeing that it's doing its purpose of entertaining people, like a lot of the stuff came through, in 2020 when the COVID first came out. So do you want to talk about that, bro, about these pieces of content that you're creating and it's serving its purpose, bro?
Yeah, like it's funny, bro. Like I only ever create from like perspective. So literally everything that I've ever made that comes from like a real experience. Like any video, any character that I've done, it comes from like something that I like very much experienced. Like I've been so lucky to be around great writers and great like creatives, and for a lot of people they get their experience from like references to like other things, like watching movies. For me, it's always on my life. Like I can even think, so like Master J, if anybody listening, is the sidestepper coach that Rans is referring to. Where that character came from was, so I was real mud at rugby, like real mud. People would be like to me, oh, fuck, just another, because I went to a private school. People would be like, oh, fuck, just another brown boy at scholarship, eh? And then they'd see me and they'd be like, oh, okay, maybe academic scholarship? I don't know about rugby. And when I was, but one thing I would always do in our rugby team was, so our coach hated my guts, hated me, and I wasn't like the team like funny guy or anything. I actually took rugby really seriously, like trained real hard. The only reason I ever got to play was because our assistant coach would see me training at like 5 a.m. on the field. So that was the only reason I actually ever made the team, was because they saw that I would train real hard. But the one like goofy thing that I would do was like I would like rugby. Sorry, this is going to tangent and then it's going to come back. I promise. Yeah. Rugby has this really funny thing of like it's a lot of guys that rugby's kind of the only thing that they ever found themselves being valuable in. It's not what the only thing they were valuable in, but it's the only thing that they found themselves kind of good at. And so you get these guys who they play rugby their whole life and then they go into coaching rugby. And then when they're too old to coach rugby, they go into managing it. They just kind of stay in rugby. And what happens when you live your life like that, tied into just one thing, you tend to really hold a lot of value in that space. And you don't like when other people from outside that space come in. And so what you do is you make it really hard for them to come in. And so what you'll find with a lot of like rugby coaches, and why rugby isn't really that accessible as a sport, is they really complicate rugby in a lot of ways that it doesn't need to be complicated, and they make it seem a lot harder than it is. It's just a fucking bunch of dudes just smacking the shit out of each other. Like, I don't need to hear about like 1-3 cuts and like, like out the back door and like pivots and all this shit. Like, we don't need all that shit. And so the one thing that I would always do is like I'd always take the piss out of how much like rugby coaches would overcomplicate rugby and like just add all this GST to it that like just doesn't like need to be there. And so that was where that character came from, was always having that thought in my head. And then here's a character who like has seemingly taken ownership over this very like specific part of the sport, which is sidestepping. And he's like, he's the one that's saying like, I made this, like, I'm like, this is me. I'm the only person that knows how to do this, because that's what rugby coaches in my head were always like to me. Yeah. Like, bro, like, I remember I had this coach, bro, who would like, he stopped me one time and he's like, you're running the wrong way. You need to run like this. And like, he like started making these like little footsteps. I was like, what the fuck out of here, Gollum? Like, what the fuck was that? So yeah, bro, like it's always from
the crack up thing is how you, that skit is, you know, you're thinking like, you know, and then you go and give us a display and it's trash.
It's trash. But
bro knows what he's doing, and then he goes to show us. It's like, hey.
Oh, bro, and it's just, it was every rugby coach I had, bro. Like, they'd be like, you boys are fucking pussies. You need to get your shoulder into it and lay your knee. Like, all right, fucking one of you run straight at me. They'd like fucking get ready to tackle them, get bumped off. Happened every time. And I'm like...
And then excuses, eh? And then excuses. Back in my day.
Oh, you know, 30 years ago, my parents hadn't even rooted to have me. Bro. Like, I don't care what happened 30 years ago. But,
like, that is classic.
You know? So just, yeah. And that's like, that's one of the many sort of experiences I always drew to that kind of led to. And I think that's, if I like pat myself on the shoulder for one thing, I think why the characters tend to translate and why my perspective translates is because I really talk from the perspective of an outsider, like almost always. And I always talk from the perspective of an outsider that doesn't actually understand. And so I think that's why it can translate across the board, because, you know, we're all outsiders in something. Like, I never try and talk like I know shit. Like, so I think I've been lucky in the fact that because that is my style, that's why it just, you know, resonates quite well.
Yeah, and it's relatable. You know, we can all sort of like see that character in all of our lives somewhere, 100%. You know, whether it's the coach or a player, you know, thinks they know it all, but is actually trash or whatever it is, you know, like we've all got some kind of reference to go off, and it's just mean that someone of your creativity knows how to act in that way that brings that memory back up for us, you know, and sidestepping is such a Māori thing, you know, bro.
Yeah, oh, bro,
you know, it's such a poly thing, bro. And for you to do it in bare feet as well, it's like, yeah, bro, like that's so authentic, bro.
Had to. No, I really appreciate that, brother. Like, yeah, it's, oh man, like you bring up such fond memories for me on like creating it, because my process of creating always starts with reflecting back on like a lot of these things. And even like, so we did the writing room for, we do, when you're making a TV show, you do what's called a writer's room. And it's literally where you're all sitting around. It's probably my favorite part of the process, because it's where you're coming up with what you're going to write for the TV show. And you're just throwing out ideas. It's so fun, bro. And like the thing that I always do in writer's room is I always start off with telling stories, and I'll tell a story and then I'll be like, so that could be something funny that we kind of reference.
That could aid
through that. Yeah. And so
there's something just about collaborative ways of creating, bro, you know, and it usually starts and the best kind of creating just happens naturally, right? And sometimes I think even just looking at stories in itself, there's just so much like wisdom, humor encapsulated in some of the stories and lived experiences that people have been through. And for you to sort of like use your creative outlet, bro, to express that, it is such a gift, bro. And trickling along, bro, it's you know, you started to blow up, bro. You started to do all of these things, and then next minute you're starting to circuit New Zealand, doing, you know, comedy in different cities and different places, and then it finishes off in Auckland, bro, selling out, you know, Sky City. So, you know, like walk us through that, bro. Like, fuck, that's out the gate. And I was at their show, bro, and fuck, it was a packed house, man.
Bro, it was crazy, yeah, and like it was. But it was crazy. Like I'll talk kind of like on the bigger picture, and then I'll talk about like, you know, the night itself. When it came to like the bigger picture thing, what I had sort of noticed when it came to doing, because obviously before I really focused on social media, I had already been doing stand-up. And what my plan had always been was to develop in stand-up and then kind of start to focus on social media.
Right.
And so, but one thing that I had really noticed was social media was always going to be my vehicle, because my long-term thing, and still remains, has always been to be in film and television and Hollywood. And so when it came to social media, that was always going to be my vehicle into television in New Zealand and Australia initially. And one thing I'd always recognized that was a lot of social media creators, especially brown social media creators, really struggled to cross over to television and to traditional mediums from social media. And I say brown creatives in particular because what I saw with like social media was when it came to like, I'll use an example, like when it came to like a Pākehā like creative, if you think about the industry in general, if you're like a white person and you have like a predominantly white audience, when it comes to doing business, when it comes to getting opportunities, a lot of industries and institutions really value like that audience, because they'll see like a white audience and be like, oh, okay, they spend money, they do this, they do that. Let's give this person opportunities in traditional mediums. But where the struggle was with brown creatives is because the industry doesn't give that same value, like they really don't. And even to this day, even though we're getting a lot more opportunities, they still don't value it anywhere near the amount that they do. And so what I saw was that it didn't matter if I got all these followers and stuff. It didn't matter if I was able to do that on social media. If they saw that it was a brown audience, they were never going to value that audience, because they don't value us. They don't value our power as people. They don't even value our money the same, bro. Like a brown person earning 100K is, in the eyes of institutions, is a lot less than a white person that gets 100K.
Wow. Even that's the same.
Even though when it's exactly the same. And so I recognized that really early on. And so when it came to going out and touring after lockdown, for me, that was always the plan from day one, was always to lead into like a really big statement in Auckland in particular. And so whilst I knew going into that tour, like I wasn't ready for a tour. I hadn't done stand-up in like 6 months. I also didn't have the amount of material required. Like they say it takes about 5 years to get like a solid hour. And I've only just hit my 5 years like now. And I did that 2 years ago. So when it came to like the standard I was at as a stand-up comedian, like I wasn't ready for it. But I knew when it came to the moment I was in, if I wanted to make that statement in order to make that crossover, I had to do that right there and right then. Because exactly, because even if I waited a month, it may not be the same that it was. And I was like completely okay with being honest with myself about that. Because the heat that it was at when it came out of lockdown, I was very open about like, I reckon I've got a month to take advantage of this. And then it'll kind of trickle off as I sort of get back out and start doing my own shit. So that was where the plan behind the tour came from, and then the plan behind doing Sky City. And the big thing with picking Sky City was because that's a theatre that all the international stand-up comedians. So they either come to Auckland and they either do Sky City or they do Spark Arena. So that's literally the two. So the caliber of comedians that had done Sky City was like all the like decent sized, like decently famous American ones, and like all the most famous Australian and New Zealand comedians and British comedians would all do Sky City. So I was like, it has to be that one. And so, yeah, bro, that was always the whole plan, was to kind of lead it into that. And then I knew if I'm able to sell this out and really put the statement out there, like they can't deny me from being able to do anything beyond just social media. And so, like I'll be honest, like the plan worked. The statement was made, and a year after kind of doing that, I'd done Celebrity Treasure Island. I did like 7 days and haven't been paying attention to like all these TV shows that had kind of been, the opportunity would have never been there for me beforehand. So
It's just coming back again to the
where they all came
that
from.
belief, bro. Just coming back to that belief again, and the saying that I really like, bro, and I actually just done like a solo podcast on it today, was around just rowing the waka as you build it. You know,
yeah, bro.
Not waiting for it to be fully built to take off.
Bro.
It's like, bro, just have whatever you can and just start rowing, and you'll pick up the pieces as you go. You know,
100%. 100%. And bro, those Sky City shows are like the perfect example of that, because like I'm totally comfortable saying like I sucked at those shows. Like the biggest audience I had done before that was like 300, and that was like 750, 2 nights in a row. And that was why I got my mates to be on the show. I don't know if you remember, Ant, but I brought my mates along because I knew I just wasn't personally ready to make that jump myself. So I knew that it doesn't matter if I suck, at least they'll get a good show because my mates are real good. And it was because like where I was at, I was just kind of like, okay, I may not be ready for this little step here, but the doors that'll open up and ready for my whole life. I'm ready to take that next step. And the only reason I'm not ready for this current step is just because of time. But if time is the only thing stopping me, then why should I wait?
Yeah.
Like if time is the only thing that's stopping me, then and exactly what you're saying, just build it as you row. And so that was my thing.
And sitting there, like, it was like fucking a mean evening, bro. And like you said, there was different caliber of people and different stories. And probably my personal favorite, bro, was the tall guy with the long curly hair and the glasses. Bro, he was just ultimate dry, but like played it like incredibly well, where I was just like, bro, this kid is the man.
He's the man, G. Bro, he's my guy.
And I think like the cool thing with you, bro, is I like your proverbs. Like, you know, you're really impromptu in a lot of your with a lot of your material back then, and even in your circuit, you know, you're really good at just picking people from the crowd and just using them to create your material. And I thought, you know, like that was mean how you're able to do that. And it's crazy when you can play off, you know, other people. So and all in all, bro, it was a mean evening, and for the energy in that room, and for you to sell out Sky City, bro, 2 nights in a row from sleeping in your car 2 years ago, bro, you would have been fully embracing that moment under the lights, cuz.
Yeah, brother. It means a lot what you're saying, bro. It honestly does. It really hits home again. So I'm super thankful for what you're saying, bro. And yeah, like I think it's one of those things that I sort of look at and I'm like, that was a moment that it's so weird looking back. It's because not only do I remember obviously that moment, but I very much still remember like the times I was dreaming of that moment. Like, so that's like an even buzzier thing in itself. Like I would sit in the caravans because so basically I like we would clean these camper vans and they were supposed to take about 3 hours each. But because I'd listen to podcasts and just fuck around, I'd take 5 hours. So I'd take ages to like clean one caravan. And I'd just sit in there, bro, and just daydream all day. And I'd just daydream about like doing theaters and like being on the radio and doing TV and like I had this very specific dream I dreamt of this vision of people like lining up and there being like a massive line to like a show of mine. And then there's this video that someone took of the line of people waiting to get in and it's like long as fuck. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. It's like, I never believed in like, not I never believed, but because I'd never experienced like manifestation, I like, you know, I never really like put any effort into it myself.
Well, at that scale,
when I saw that, oh, bro, and then when I experienced that, I was like, that shit's real.
You can't deny it, eh? Bro. But I think also, bro, the cool thing about that is like you made a statement. You transferred your audience from online into physical seats, bro. You know, like, and that's a mad statement. And there's such a huge gap between people who have followers and people who actually show up for you. Like there's a big gap within that, and for you to sort of solidify that you're the real deal in those 2 evenings, bro. Like, fuck, big credit to you, brother. And it's trickled on to so many other things, bro. You've made TV appearances. You're on like a New Zealand reality TV show, Treasure Island. Like, bro, like that was mean, bro. And I'm so gutted that Lance didn't swap you out, bro. I was like, no, bro, what?
Oh man, I feel for Lancy because I told him it's all good. Like I told him, so they didn't even play it for the length that it actually was like in real life, bro. We were there for honestly like over 5 minutes. Him going, bro, let me do it, and I was like, nah, don't do it. We were sat there for ages, bro. Like on the thing, they played it like it was a couple seconds. So I felt for Lancy because, and I must say, it was like flattering on one half because he got so much shit when that came out. People were like, you should have saved Joey D. But so it was flattering to see how like passionate people were about it. But then on the other end, I felt bad for the bro because he really did he really was like, he really did want me to stay, and but I was, it was just that
bromance, bro. You know, you sort of like when you're watching something and you've got these fantasies going on in your mind about what would be the perfect ending, you know, and just seeing the bros get to that end and for it to finish, I was like, oh, shit.
Oh, bro, the crazy thing is that with the card we had, like with all the things that we had and the plan we had, bro, we would have gone all the way to the end.
Bro, straight up.
We actually would have. But what happened was, so Candy Lane, so for anybody listening, to give you context, basically on Celebrity Treasure Island, how you get voted out is you go up against the opposite team votes you in to go up against somebody else, and then the loser gets eliminated. And so we had this card where if I got voted in, I could swap someone else in. And so, like, I don't know if they even addressed it on the thing, but our plan was if I ever got called to go in, we were just going to swap me out with Candy. But what had happened was, like, I felt so bad for Candy, and even though Candy was like, didn't do much, but it like, you know, Candy deserved to be there just as much as anybody else. And so I was just like, you know, I would much rather go up against Jess and try and actually beat her than throw Candy under the bus. Yeah. And like, I'd much rather do it that way, because I think even if we did swap out and Candy lost, I knew I would feel so bad about it that I probably would have just pulled out anyways. Like genuinely. So I knew for me, I was just like, okay, let me just go in and face Jess, because either way, I look like the man. For one, if I lose, then I lose to somebody mean, and if I win, then I just beat the person that everyone thinks is going to win. Because everyone thought Jess was going to win.
You must have some bloody kind of relationship with monkeys now, bro, because those fellas weren't sticking up for you, brother.
I don't know if my monkeys had like extra third leg or bit of oil on my ones, but I was watching Jess, dude. Bro, you know what? They never called this out, and I never did anything either. But I could see so there was a stick that like we had to like stack it up higher than the stick. And they said we weren't allowed to lean the thing on the stick. But I saw her leaning her one on the stick. But I was like, whatever.
Oh, bro, that just speaks more to you, bro. Like my competitive nature, I would be like, da 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 da.
Well, but I think I was lucky that I'd already been there for 3 weeks. So I got out on the 20th day, so literally just under 3 weeks. So I'd already won 2 charity challenges and like been there for a good amount of time. So I was like kind of in a headspace where I was like, you know, if I go out, like I'm proud to say like I'd won 3 charity challenges. Yeah. So like I was like, it is what it is. If I had nothing, If I had nothing, I would have been spewing. But I appreciate it.
It was super entertaining, bro. Like, you know, just to see you guys plotting and knowing that you fellas just had this bro code going on and plotting and everything just started to work. Like, you were puppet masters for a little bit there, bro. It was happening in that way. So to see it in that way, and a crack up moment for me was you and is it John Tuvasa?
Oh, Johnny,
yeah, where you fellas were running tired, you know, around the sand. And I was like, oh, bro, the bros look fucking tired, man.
Oh, bro. The worst one was, I remember it was me and Johnny, and then we're running on the thing, and we look over, and it's just Lance and Art. Yeah. And all I saw, bro, I'm shit you not, all I saw was 2 6-packs. And I saw 2 6-packs, and I looked down at mine and Johnny's, and I was like, we're fucked. We're fucked.
But it was a good strategy.
I see two 6-packs and 4 love handles on our side. We're fucked.
It was a mean strategy though, bro. But they picked up on it and they were like, "Oh, I think we got the guys here."
Yeah, because what I told the team was they said you could drop off straight away, and so the mistake that we made was we dropped off in the first one because none of the other teams realized you could drop off. So if we hadn't dropped off, no one else would have done it. And so we didn't even need to drop off in the first one. So we wasted that. And then so that was kind of my bad, bro.
But yeah, anyway, bro, like that was a really cool, bro. Me and Hinepania, bro, we're handy watching that, you know, and we binged it because we caught up to it late, but you know, it was mean to just to watch, you know, that and every time that I saw you, bro, I always just thought of your come up and bro, you're doing the things that you said you're gonna do and hella proud of you, bro. And to wrap us off, I wanted to spend just a part of this podcast, bro, where we can talk about mental health, bro. Like you've mentioned previously, just, you know, you're doing therapy. It's something that you support, you know, Gumboot Friday. It's something that you're very talkative about on your socials. And so, you know, talk about mental health, bro, and what does that look like for you in your space?
Yeah, for me, like for me it was, I think my first real experience with it was probably my dad. Like I watched my dad kind of struggle through his like emotions and struggle through his own, I'll say depression. It's never been anything that my dad openly acknowledged, but I know that's something that my old man experienced, and I would watch him openly struggle with it as I was a kid, and openly struggle with not only his own emotions, but struggle with like me and my brother's emotions as well, and like really talking them through. And so, but what I saw as well was I saw why my dad had that struggle. My dad comes from a family of 5 boys and my grandfather, his father, who is very much like, you don't talk about not only don't talk to me about your feelings, don't talk to me about anything. I don't want to hear like anything from you. My granddad was a pretty hearty dude. So he was just sort of like, you know, typical Māori from like that generation. Like, they're just as racist to us as like anybody else. Like he was so old school. My dad came up in that way that I experienced that as a kid. So when I started to really formulate my own experiences and my own opinions, I really made an active push to really be more open about it, because I have 2 younger brothers. And so mine came out of a wanting to set an example for my younger brothers, and set an example of being okay with talking about, like, you know, vulnerabilities and talking about things that you're kind of going through. Because the standard that I continue to hold myself to is the standard of somebody that I want my brothers to have in their life. And it's both a good thing for me, but also a very toxic thing for me that I'm working through in my own ways. But for me, that was really where it started. Was I want to be a man that, like, my brothers feel comfortable not only being around, but also adopting like things that I sort of do myself. And one of those things was speaking about like my vulnerabilities and what I struggle with. And so because that was something that I already wanted to do with my brothers, when I then got a platform, because it was something I was already wanting to do, it was just something that I put out there sort of on the broader context of, you know, being who I've become, I guess. So.
And that's beautiful, bro. I think it's, you know, such an important part of our growth as males, as Polynesian, you know, men, Māori men. You know, it's great to now see again just another way to normalize and humanize, you know, the experiences that we go through, and being able to step into their vulnerability, and even being able to acknowledge the honesty of the things that you're thinking and the things that you're feeling is a great way, not necessarily to just overcome it completely, but it's a way to find a level of comfort with it. And when you become comfortable with it, it's now less about being vulnerable. It's about, cool, now I have the confidence and the maturity within myself to sit with this long enough to figure out what is it that's keeping me here. And I think it's an aspirational step to get to be not fearful of those vulnerabilities, but more comfortable with it so that we have the opportunity to move past it. And as you probably know, right, it takes time to get to that point.
For sure, bro, for sure. And you know, I think the biggest thing that I've kind of really come to when it comes to like my view on men's mental health and like the struggle that we go through as men, especially brown men. One thing that I've kind of seen is like as the expectations that we sort of sit on, and I've kind of mentioned it earlier, like when it comes to us as brown men, we have, you know, very similar expectations to everybody. You know, there's societal expectations on like, you know, what kind of jobs are acceptable, like, you know, what, you know, we should have a certain amount of money, and you should be able to provide for yourself and provide for your family, and you should be able to make enough money to be able to present yourself in a certain way. Like we face very much those expectations that other people have, but we then, I say brown because I refer to, you know, Pacifica and Māori, we face like the cultural expectations, but I don't mean cultural in a sense of like, you know, like what falls under, you know, how we fall into like tikanga per se. I mean more so in the sense of what us being the culture that we are, the expectations that come with that. So I'll give you like a practical example. Like my youngest brother, he's 17. And one of the big things that he's really struggling with is a very similar struggle to me, in that as a young brown man, he has the expectation of being really good at rugby, and at school, they talk a lot of shit about him or to him because he isn't like the superstar rugby player. He trains really hard because he wants to be, but he isn't. And which is, you know, when you think about it objectively, you're like, that's fine. But when you look about the societal expectations of our culture, and you put beside my brother all the young brown men that we sort of put on a pedestal and be like, these are the guys that are acceptable. These are the guys that you should look up to. They're all young brown rugby players. You know, they all make a lot of money. They're all good looking. They all seemingly have perfect lives. So those are the extra sort of cultural expectations that we have to kind of navigate around. And they're not only perpetuated on ourselves by, like, I'd say external people like society, but they're things that are put on us by like the people around us, our friends, our family, all those kinds of people really play into the perpetuation of those stereotypes. Because I think to even my own struggle, the people that were telling me that I had to play rugby and had to be good at rugby was all my family and friends, all the people around. And, you know, I can't blame society for that. You know, that's the people that were kind of in my circle, but I can't blame them because they're also just pushing on part of it that were put onto them. So because we face that extra part of it, but we have that extra layer of it's coming from our family. And so we really take it seriously because of what family means to us. But we don't see where that view from our family is coming from on a broader scale. And so unless we get the opportunity to really acknowledge that, the broadness of that, we get bogged down in these ideas. And for some of us, it gets to the point where we don't see any value in ourselves because we're so far from what's put onto us as acceptable that, you know, we can't handle it anymore. And that's like the extra challenge that I've kind of experienced. And so that's why for me, I'm really vocal as a comedian because as a young brown man, that wasn't something that, like, you know, we're all told as young brown kids as something that we should aspire to be. That wasn't something we were told. Like, as I still have like my nan, like my Fijian nan, being like, "Do you like even make money? Like, what do you do? What do you do? Like, actually do for a job? You know, like that's kind of the attitude." So for me, I really speak vocally on a lot of these, and I speak vocally on my success in a lot of them, because for me, I'm trying to set that new view on, we don't have to be a certain way to get to all these things. We can be whatever the fuck we want. I think Māori and Pacifica, we're the most talented people in the world. 100. We can pick up anything and be good at it. And so I'm trying to set that example of like, comedy was just the thing that I found. That was just the thing that I picked. So go and find the thing that you want to pick, because you'll do the same shit that I'm doing and whatever that is. And I can promise that. So that's kind of where I speak to.
And that's incredibly like powerful, bro. And like you said, it's cool to talk about these kinds of things, because like you said, bro, there's layers upon layers upon layers that our young Tane are sort of carrying around with them, without they don't even know it's happening. Like there's no consciousness or awareness about why they feel unhappy or why they feel insecure, because it's coming from elsewhere and they just accepting it as it is.
100%. My brother raised he made me think of a really interesting thing. The other day we were talking about one of his mates, and he was like, "Yeah, like, what is it? It's so weird. Like when we're talking, he just talks like, talks like us. But then when he gets around all the boys, he talks real hoary. Or when he's in front of like girls, he talks like real brown, and it's real weird." And what I then, and hearing that, what I was like to him was like, well, when you think about it, when it comes to publicly, he's just falling back into what he is continuously told is like an acceptable, understandable brown person. Because if I think to myself, when I was like growing up, they'd hear me speak and be like, well, "You talk weird for a brown dude." Like, what does that even mean? Yeah. I mean, I know what it means, but people have a preconceived
idea of how you should be. And if you don't fit that, they're going to say something that's going to make you question yourself.
100%. And so you think about even something as little as that, that's a very small pressure amongst the many pressures that we face when it comes to upholding this thing that we feel like we have to uphold in order to be accepted. And when you're carrying that, and when you don't understand why you feel that is such a dangerous thing, because you're basically walking around feeling like you're incapable of being something that you don't even know what that thing is that you can't be, and you don't even know how you're incapable of it, but you know that you're incapable of it. That's such a dangerous thing when you don't know that. And so many of our young brown men are experiencing that from as young as my brother's age to as old as my dad's age.
Wow. And I think even at the opposite spectrum, bro, like even the young brown, males who are incredibly talented, I think they're facing a different level of pressure. Even when
Absolutely.
So I don't think the pressure or the sense of subconscious behavior that people are receiving, I think it's unbiased. It's happening to every single person. But I think what we're sort of speaking to is that there shouldn't be this level of confusion and this level of lack of confidence in young people to start off with. And coming back to your point, it's us trying to fit into this social standard or this cultural standard of us fitting into those kind of shoes. Whereas like, fuck, I don't want to be shoes. I want to be like, that coach, and I want to just wear bare feet and earth out. So the thing where I think this is coming from too, bro, is I've been recently inspired by Kanye West, like just watched this documentary, and he's speaking a lot about how you're speaking too, bro. Like he legit does not give a flying fuck about anyone in their boundaries. He believes in himself so much that he's going to say what he wants to say, and he's going to do what he's going to do. And there was a part within the documentary where he sort of says, someone asked him, and they said, if you were to look at yourself 10 years in your past and looking at yourself now, would you believe where you are now? And he said, nah, this is what it's like. I used to tell people where I would be in 10 years and they wouldn't believe me. So that level of confidence and self-belief is something that he innately had. And I feel we as males and even our young people, we can sort of hope that they have at least a smidgen of that kind of confidence and that kind of belief in themselves, that they're okay to pave their own way. And I feel we do it in our own unique way. And there are many other people who share the same message of authenticity, of being new, because it really is the key, isn't it, bro?
Yeah. And the lesson that I learned, bro, and I mentioned it before, it's people that do it for us. Like, as I find generally, like, I'll say amongst Islanders, and I have this experience through like coaching, because I used to coach volleyball when I was younger, and coached a bit of rugby as well. I find with Islanders, like, we're very word of affirmation. We very much need to like hear it be said to us. Yeah. And Māori, I'll actually say, are pretty similar. But the difficulty is when you live in a society like we do, where we don't, it's frowned upon to speak to those kinds of things.
100.
How do you like, it's a beautiful paradox in itself, where our main sort of receptive like language to accepting like, any kind of positivity is words of affirmation. But our biggest thing that we refuse to do is actually speak affirmation to each other. Like, it's like it's this whole
conundrum,
exactly, that we kind of face with. And so for me, I found that the key for me, bro, was I was so lucky that I found people that spoke those words to me. And for me, like, for a lot of us, I just will say, like, practical advice, you got to find those people. You got to find
100.
those people that speak to you that way, and they don't hold that to you. Like, it doesn't come with terms that they speak to you that way. They speak to you how you deserve to be spoken to. And the honest and very sad reality for a lot of our young brown men, they're not in environments where they get to experience that. And that's just me being completely honest. So for anybody listening, I would say is find that person.
What comes up for me when you share that, bro, is there was a word that you said, and it was deserving. And we have to first feel deserving of hearing those kinds of affirmation. Whereas if we're not, even when we hear it, we don't accept it.
Exactly.
So that's that paradox you're talking about. It's not one, are we not saying that to our peers? But when it's said to us, we brush it off. It's like, nah, you're the man. Yeah. It's sort of like when that kind of affirmation comes to you, the moment where you allow yourself to be open to receive that and just give a humble, oh, thanks, bro. And there's nothing eat ass about that. There's nothing big headed about that. It's you accepting the blessing. And the moment you can do that and you feel, you can observe, holy shit, that felt good. It's now, it's sort of like paying it forward. It's like, holy shit, this feeling feels good. So now you can start sharing that to other people. And that's what I was able to observe in my journey. The moment that I started to accept, praise from people, not in a big head way, but in a way where I could really see where they were coming from and acknowledging myself and my truth, then it really did help me step into that more. It was more of an encouragement to be like, bro, carry on. And I'm like, the moment I said yes to that, the more I started to do more of that.
Absolutely. But it changed my life, on a practical level. I was writing down the positive affirmations that I was receiving from other people. So not only was I not throwing it away in person, I was writing it down and solidifying it in something visual for me to see. And that was how seriously I took receiving positive affirmation, because I got to a point where I was able to acknowledge that, okay, I really need that. And not only do I need it, like, it fuels me to a level that I cannot like explain. And so why would I dismiss it? I need to keep it. And keeping it, bro, changed my life. Changed my life.
That's the tipping point, is
bro.
When you get to a point and you get the awareness, and if it feels good, like why are we stopping that?
Exactly.
And it's authentically good. It's not like this isn't here just for the moment. This is something that really makes me feel good, and it's genuine. And so
100%.
The moment we can hold on to that, not in a space that if it doesn't come, then I'm going to feel bad. but I'm talking to when we can hold it and just bring it closer to us and fully appreciate it and nurture that. It does something that is so unseen, you know. It does something so unseen. It's more of a confirmation to that self-belief, and it really does just enhance that. So, brother, this has been next level, and I'm glad, you know, we've been able to have this time together, bro. But I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I know we could probably like carry on and on. And, you know, I'm keen on doing like another episode somewhere down the track, bro, because I feel we went on a long-winded tangent, but there's still so much that I feel we could bring out of this conversation. But just want to say thank you so much, bro, for your time, for your story, for your experience. But going to hand it over to you, bro, if there's anything that you have on your heart that you want to share to those listeners, or maybe to even your old self, bro. Just going to give you some time to share that.
Appreciate you, brother. Like, honestly, man, like I really mean it when I say this is quite a full circle moment. Like it very much was a milestone for me, was to be able to talk to you. And milestones are something that I really take seriously. And even, for example, I remember Hiku Jackson is quite like a renowned like young Māori journalist. He works for Te Ao on Māori television, and Hiku did Willie Wairua's first ever profile, and I remember seeing Willie absolutely blow up after he was already pretty big, but I remember Willie stepped into like a new realm after Hiku did his profile on Willie, and I remember putting that mental note in my head and being like, I'm going to get an interview with Hiku one day. And I know when I do get that interview, that's when I'll be stepping into my new realm. And I remember getting that interview with Hiku, and very much it did the exact thing that I thought it was going to do. In the same way it did for Willie, it did for me too. And it was just something really small that, you know, I don't really know how many people acknowledge it, but it was massive for me. And this is in the exact same thing, bro, because, you know, when you first reached out to me, I was watching your podcast and I'd already heard you talk on a lot of podcasts before that. So I actually know your story quite well. And so for me, this is still a massive like full circle moment for me to be able to even be on here and talk to you, brother. So
appreciate that, brother.
That's my biggest acknowledgement, is for you having me, Rand, and for you, you know, having me on this platform that you have, brother. That means the world. And it's just a pleasure knowing you, bro.
Bro, appreciate that, bro. And those generous and kind words have been received with a lot of love, bro. So thanks heaps. And bro, I have really enjoyed this chat this evening, bro. So thank you so much for providing this time and for us to complete the circle and for it to be as it was. And I've really enjoyed it, bro. And just want to say thank you again to the listeners. Thank you for tuning in if you've come this far. At the end of the day, we're just young Pacifica Māori men here in Aotearoa who are in a space where we love what we do. And we're in a space where we can connect and hopefully bring value to those of you who choose to follow our journeys. And in saying that, if you haven't been following Joey D, make sure that you go and follow him on IG. See the work that he's doing over at This Is Westpac, which is his company that he's doing some amazing work out of. And if you want to have a good laugh, scroll all the way back to the very beginning and you'll be able to connect some of the things that we've been talking about this evening to the things that are on his timeline. So without further ado, brother, I just want to say thanks, and to the people listening, mai ora kia koutou katoa. Boots.